What if I told you that a war spanning over 4 decades resulted in zero direct combat between the two main adversaries? Imagine a conflict so intense and far-reaching, yet fought without a single official battle between the key players. A war where the battlefield was not a rugged, war-torn landscape, but rather the minds of world leaders, the halls of international diplomacy, and the secret corners of intelligence agencies. This was a different kind of warfare, one characterized by subterfuge, psychological tactics, and indirect confrontations. Welcome to the world of the Cold War, a chilling period of global history that took place from the mid-20th century to the early 90s. This was not a conventional war but a battle of ideologies, a struggle for global dominance between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. On one side was the United States, a beacon of capitalism and democracy, guided by the belief in individual freedoms and free markets. On the other was the Soviet Union, a stronghold of communism, championing state control and equality among its citizens. Yet despite their starkly contrasting ideologies, these two nations never engaged in direct combat with each other. Instead, they waged a war of influence and intimidation, each trying to expand their sphere of influence around the globe. They did this through a complex web of political maneuvering, economic strategies, technological competition, and most notably, through proxy wars, where they supported opposing sides in third-party conflicts. The Cold War was also a time of intense espionage, with both sides investing heavily in intelligence agencies. Covert operations, spy networks, and clandestine activities were the order of the day, as each side sought to gain an upper hand over the other. This was a war where the fear of nuclear annihilation hung heavy in the air. The arms race between these two superpowers led to the creation of enough nuclear weapons to wipe out most of life on Earth, adding a terrifying dimension to this silent conflict. This was the Cold War, a silent battle that shaped the world as we know it. A war fought in the shadows, yet its effects were far from invisible. The echoes of this conflict continue to resonate in our world today, shaping geopolitics and international relations in ways we may never fully understand. But how did this all begin? What led to this silent, yet potent conflict? As World War II drew to a close in the mid-40s, the world found itself in a state of flux. The global powers that had banded together to defeat the Axis powers now stood at crossroads, their futures uncertain. Among these, two nations emerged as superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The end of the war saw Germany divided into 4 occupied zones, each controlled by one of the victorious allies, the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. The city of Berlin, nestled deep in the Soviet zone, was similarly divided. However, ideological differences between the democratic West and the communist East soon led to tensions. This division of Germany and Berlin became the first physical symbol of the Cold War, a metaphorical iron curtain that split the world in two. The ideological battle lines were drawn. On one side, the United States and its allies championed capitalism and democracy. On the other side, the Soviet Union propagated communism and a state-controlled economy. Each side believed their system was superior, and each was determined to spread its influence around the globe. In the late 40s, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was established by the United States and its Western allies as a collective defense pact against potential Soviet aggression. In response, the Soviet Union and its Eastern Bloc allies formed the Warsaw Pact in the mid-50s. These two military alliances symbolized the division of Europe and the world beyond. The world was now caught in a standoff. Each superpower, armed with nuclear weapons, was locked in a tense game of chess, each move calculated to gain strategic advantage without tipping into full-scale war. The stakes were high, the tension palpable. And so the stage was set for a conflict unlike any seen before. The world braced itself for a new kind of war, a Cold War, where battles were fought not with bullets and bombs but with words, ideologies, and the looming threat of nuclear annihilation. The 1960s brought the world to the brink of nuclear disaster. But how close did we really come? As we delve into the decade that defined the height of tension during the Cold War, we'll uncover the chilling truth of just how perilously close we came to the edge. The decade kicked off with a bang, quite literally, with the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. This was perhaps the most significant event of the entire Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union, the two superpowers of the time, found themselves in a standoff after the discovery of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. For 13 intense days, the world watched and waited, with the threat of nuclear war looming ominously overhead. But let's not forget about the space race. This was another prominent front of the Cold War, where the United States and the Soviet Union vied for dominance not just on Earth, but beyond our atmosphere, in the vast expanse of space. The Soviets had initially taken the lead with the launch of Sputnik in the late 1950s, but the United States wasn't far behind, marking a significant victory with the Apollo moon landing in 1969. The space race was not just about technological superiority but also a strategic chess game to demonstrate ideological supremacy. Then there was the Vietnam War, a bloody conflict that lasted for more than a decade, from the mid-1960s to the mid-70s. This war was a symbol of the ideological conflicts of the time, with the United States supporting South Vietnam to prevent the spread of communism from the north. These events, along with numerous others, marked the height of tension during the Cold War, a time when the very fabric of civilization was under threat of being torn apart by nuclear war. The world held its breath, unsure of what tomorrow might bring. The tension couldn't last forever, so how did this silent war finally come to an end? In the twilight years of the Cold War, the Soviet Union was in a state of deep economic stagnation. The arms race had drained their resources, and their centralized economy was unable to compete with the dynamic market economies of the West. The cracks were beginning to show, and a change was on the horizon. The winds of change blew in with the rise of Mikhail Gorbachev to the position of General Secretary of the Communist Party in 1985. Gorbachev was a different kind of leader, one who recognized that the Soviet Union needed radical reforms if it was to survive. He introduced two key policies that would play a pivotal role in the end of the Cold War: glasnost and perestroika. Glasnost, meaning openness, was Gorbachev's policy of increased transparency and freedom of speech. It was a drastic departure from the oppressive regimes of his predecessors. Suddenly, the Soviet people were allowed to voice their grievances, and the world watched as the tightly controlled Soviet narrative began to unravel. Perestroika, or restructuring, was Gorbachev's attempt to overhaul the stagnant Soviet economy. He sought to introduce elements of free market capitalism, hoping to boost economic growth and productivity. Unfortunately, the changes were too little, too late, and the Soviet economy continued its downward spiral. As the Soviet Union grappled with these internal changes, a momentous event was unfolding in Germany. On a chilly November night in 1989, the Berlin Wall, the most potent symbol of the East-West divide, was torn down by jubilant crowds. This marked the beginning of the end of the Cold War as the Iron Curtain that had divided Europe for so long began to crumble. The Soviet Union officially dissolved in 1991, marking the end of the Cold War. The world watched in amazement as the once mighty superpower fragmented into 15 separate countries. And just like that, the long-standing conflict faded into the annals of history. The Cold War may be over, but its impact is still felt today. But what exactly is this legacy? The Cold War, a pivotal period in our global history spanning roughly from 1945 to 1991, left a profound mark on the world. The end of this intense conflict didn't just signify the collapse of the Soviet Union, but it also catalyzed a dramatic shift in global power dynamics. With the United States emerging as the sole superpower, the world found itself in a new era, the unipolar moment. The balance of power was disrupted, leading to a shift in international relations. This change in dynamics wasn't merely political, it also spurred economic transformations, fueling globalization and fostering the rise of emerging economies. However, the Cold War also left behind a chilling legacy: the continued threat of nuclear weapons. The arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union led to the development and proliferation of these devastating weapons. Today, the world is still grappling with the challenge of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. The haunting specter of nuclear warfare, born out of the Cold War, remains a pressing concern. The ideological divide that was at the heart of the Cold War also persists in some parts of the world. The clash between capitalism and communism has morphed into a broader conflict of ideologies. Even as the world has grown more interconnected, deep-seated divisions continue to exist. often leading to political tensions and conflicts. The Cold War's legacy is not just a story of power shifts, nuclear threats, and ideological divides. It's also a tale of resilience, of how humanity navigated through one of the most challenging periods of modern history. It's a testament to our collective ability to adapt and evolve. The echoes of the Cold War still resonate, reminding us of a time when the world was on the edge of a precipice. The lessons we've learned from this era continue to shape our world, guiding us as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century.